Okay, so this video is on The Dictator's Handbook, which is a book by Bruce Mesquita and Alistair Smith. This is a structural account of politics. Politics, the author says, is defined by rules. In their view, rational actors maximize their self-interest within the constraints of existing rules. This is what I like to call politics without romance. It's also called public choice theory sometimes. This analysis of politics suggests the behavior of politicians and statesmen is best explained as if they are rationally out to maximize their private welfare. Now, this doesn't mean that their motivations are necessarily self-interested. It means their actions turned out to be self-interested. We don't know what their motivations are. Their motivations might be quite good, but as we'll see in a minute, that's not necessarily what matters. This unromantic view of politics probably sounds a little harsh to most of you. If you look around yourself, you see people acting often benevolently. They often have the public welfare at heart, and sometimes they're capable of great sacrifices on behalf of other people. And I don't think the authors really want to deny this view of the world. I think what they want to do is place a strong emphasis on rational self-interest. They want to help us focus on a particular aspect of the political world without denying the other aspects exist. They want to say, look, most of the time, under most circumstances, this is a good framework that you should adopt in order to explain and understand what's going on, and perhaps in some cases predict what's going to happen. So in politics, I think they want to say, if we observe good behavior, it's more the exception than the rule. And in most cases, what looks like good behavior will really be the pursuit of self-interest for some actors behind the scenes. Now, this unromantic view of politics is often unromantic even for the politician. Even the politician who wants to genuinely serve the public turns out to be constrained by the necessities of staying in power. That is to say, the ruler needs to get reelected or needs to secure support for his dictatorship. To secure support and reelection, the ruler needs to gain the support of people who, maybe aren't as good as he is, even if he's well motivated. He needs to gain the support of key supporters and give them goods or services that they want in exchange for their support. In America, we sometimes call these groups special interest groups. These might be unions, corporations, trade associations, or even the media. If you want to explain why certain policies are in effect, the authors are saying, you need to figure out where the ruler is getting the support from. So if you want to know why President Obama wants some things covered by health insurance, medical conditions, that is, covered by health insurance, it's not his ideology you have to consult, it's not what would make the most economic sense, but it's which groups of people he really needs support from to get either reelected or to keep his party in power. Conversely, if you want to know why George Bush attacked Iraq, then you have to look at which part of his support base was most benefited by this. So, this framework brings the author to essentially divide the world into two basic types of regimes, what they call small coalition regimes and large coalition regimes. Later in the course, we'll see that most people have a much larger menu of regimes that they like to typify, but these guys have two, and I think it's a good place to start. Small coalition regimes are regimes where the ruler's power depends on only a small number of supporters. Usually this group of supporters includes the army and important economic actors like big companies. Sometimes it also includes the religious establishment, or even in certain regions, local tribesmen or warlords who might have the allegiance of specific areas. The small coalition ruler always needs to offer a better deal to these key supporters than any potential rivals. These key figures are sometimes called the winning coalition, right, or the essentials. If the ruler doesn't pay his army, or it looks like he might negatively impact the fortunes of key economic supporters, these essentials will move to replace him with someone who gives him a better deal. Large coalition regimes are regimes where the ruler's continued existence or continued power depends on a large number of supporters. And most genuine democracies are large coalition regimes. To maximize the chances of winning an election, a ruler has to find a way to garner the support of at least 50% of the population, plus one vote. What this means is that it doesn't just dictate who gets rewarded, but it also dictates where the rewards are targeted. Usually middle-of-the-road, middle-class voters. These are the people who could go either way, and so they end up being they need to be part of the winning coalition. Now, they're called large coalition regimes for a reason. It's because the number of people you really need in order to get elected and stay in power is much larger than in small coalition regimes. So, how do leaders satisfy their supporters and stay in power? Well, Demeskita and Smith come up with 5 rules, and they ultimately say these rules apply regardless of whether you're in a democracy or an autocracy. Regardless of whether you're in a small coalition regime or a large coalition regime, if you want to stay in power, you need to obey these rules. So, rule number 1 is that you have to you have to try to keep your essential supporters, your winning coalition, as small as possible. Okay, why do you want to do this? Because if you keep them as small as possible, it makes them easier to, it makes it easier for you to reward them. 2, you try to keep the nominal selectorate, right, which is the group of people who could replace members of your essential coalition, as large as possible. Now, in a democracy, this might mean staying open to making deals with non-allied groups, right? You want to make deals with people who might not vote for you or didn't vote for you last election, but you still don't want to burn your bridges with them. Or you can try to increase the number of people who vote if you think that these new people are going to vote for you. So in the United States, for instance, both Republicans and Democrats sometimes want to increase immigration in order to perhaps boost their number of voters. Similarly, if you think that younger voters, for instance, or voters who've been disenfranchised by felony convictions might vote for you, then you might want to enfranchise them or re-enfranchise them whenever possible. So, on this rather cynical view, the reason why Republicans under Abraham Lincoln wanted to abolish slavery might be, at least in part, because they thought that by doing so they could get a whole bunch of new voters and therefore achieve dominion over the Union. Okay, rule number 3, control the flow of revenue. You want to control the flow of revenue because without revenue you obviously cannot reward any of your supporters. So that's absolutely key. 4, you want to pay your supporters enough to be a better bet than your challengers. That is, you want to pay them enough that they won't switch their support to somebody else, but you don't want to pay them much more than that. All of that is money that you could funnel to your pockets, or if you're a really nice guy, you can funnel to the public. So anything extra would be wasted. And rule number 5, never sacrifice the interests of your supporters to make people you don't need happy. So in a dictatorship, this means that you don't want to keep the public that happy, not at the expense of your supporters. In a democracy, this means that people who don't vote don't count. So disproportionately, at least in the United States, the poor, the less educated, the young don't vote. Now, what this doesn't mean you can't try to put policies together that will improve the lot of the poor, the less educated, the young, but you can't put these policies into place if they conflict with, say, the retirement pensions of older, wealthier people. So we have a budget crunch right now. If it comes to a choice between cutting Social Security and cutting Pell Grants to students, I'm sorry, students, but chances are it will be educational funding that gets cut, not Social Security, and the reason for that is that by and large, younger people vote less, and so are less likely to be part of a winning coalition. Okay, so that's the framework for the book. The book is trying to explain this dizzyingly complex world of politics in every country and every leader by simply examining the rules of the game, and particularly examining whether it's a large or a small coalition regime. In particular, they want to analyze the relationship between the number of essentials, the number of interchangeables, right, the number of people who could become essentials, and then everyone else. Right? This is a very highly stylized, abstract framework. It's a very simple framework. but they claim that it explains a lot. On this framework, culture doesn't matter very much, individual psychology doesn't matter a whole that much. What really does matter is how individual self-interest interacts with the rules of the game. So, all this being said, our authors leave, I think, quite a few important questions unanswered. And the most important one, to me at least, is how do the rules ever get changed? Why do small coalition regimes ever become large coalition regimes? This is called the problem of democratic transitions. And this is, unfortunately, an area we're not going to be able to get into in this course that much, but hopefully you'll get to explore it in other courses. Right? But this idea that small coalition regimes can become large coalition regimes. And this might be a challenge to their view, in as much as it's not clear why a dictator would ever voluntarily increase the number of essentials that he needs to rule. And it's also not clear how anybody who's a challenger could use the public to overthrow people with a lot of weapons. Okay, people with the support of the army, in other words. And yet sometimes it happens, right? If we look at the fall of the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc in 1989 to around 1991, we see armies essentially fail to back up their rulers. Okay. Another thing that another thing that this sort of explanation, which I would call, it's a structuralist explanation. Another thing this sort of structuralist explanation has a hard time dealing with is coming up with an account of how perceptions of individual self-interest can change. Right? The idea is that self-interest is pretty much a given, but how people understand the self, I think, is something that is quite likely to be able to change from one culture to another and one time to another. So, again, a challenge. But nonetheless, a thought-provoking book, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts.